Alex Gray, one of the foremost psychedelic inspired artists. His work, which can be very well described as spiritual art, is well known. He here describes his art and his inspiration during the Cannabis Cup 1995 in Amsterdam.
About the hemispheres of the brain, the rational, the intuitive hemispheres, and so shaved half of it, and let's see, let's project it forward. I did a variety of kind of performance, kind of painting events. This is a billboard, a private billboard, and just with this, let's move forward. I went on the subway also with this half and half here, and this was called Private Subway, and I just went back and forth on the subway like this. Next, this was called leaflets, and I handed out leaflets with my face on it, and it said, come out with me to dinner and be my friend, or throw this down and step on my face. And so there were a handful of people who threw it down, and a handful of people who called me for dinner, but I was not a wealthy artist at the time, so they understood I was going Dutch, and so to speak, and they opted out. So a lot of my pieces had to do with polarities. I was feeling this radical kind of shift of polarities in my being that's well known to all the ancient mystery schools, the yin and yang and all the rest of that stuff, and so I was going to externalize them in a way. This piece was called Brain Sack, and I'd stolen a brain from a medical school, and then I ate a plate of spaghetti here, and shaved the other side of my hair onto the plate, and then I put the brain onto the hair, and took the universal antidote, the syrup of Ipecac, and proceeded to, you know, vomit the spaghetti onto the brain. And then the next, then I put it all in a garbage bag. This brain sack. This was an exorcism, I think, of some. I had done the half-shave thing for half a year, and this was prior to my doing any kind of psychedelic work and anything like that. I think it was more or less in working in the dark, I guess, a lot. Next. I was still following out this polarity thing, so I went to the North Swami Rama talks about it, going from the third eye to the top chakra and things. So it's no longer the opposites and dualisms fighting with each other, but I felt the sort of the co-merging of the opposites. So, well, I was still working through a lot of dark imagery, going through it. It was going like, and it was speaking, and although I don't ascribe any demonic nature to this, you know, poor being, it somehow in my consciousness that I was projecting out there, it had become personified with evil, or a demonic force, or a demonic force was speaking through it. And so it was more or less my time to go over the edge, to flip out, and I was peering over the precipice, and then I thought, you know, divine love is the strongest power. And I kept saying that and affirming that in the face of this being, and the being dissipated totally. And blue light replaced it. And it said, "I'm Mr. Lewis. I'm an interplanetary angel. I'll watch over you for a little while." And so that was one turning point for me. I started looking towards the positive elements in my life, like my relationship with Allison and our various kinds of experiences with mind-expanding substances that were very important in changing my spiritual orientation in life. And so we developed this device called the Mindfold. And it's really a light-tight blindfold with earplugs, sort of a poor man's isolation chamber. And it was a blank screen for projecting the imagination onto it. Really perfect arena for tripping. And so we sold like 2,500 of them all over the world and then sold the business. But we did trade shows much like this. Well, not so much like this, but something like this. Let's see. So this piece was called Meditations on Mortality. And I was totally in black grease paint. Allison was totally in white. And we were on this yin-yang symbol here. She did a walking meditation. I was seated. And at a certain point in this kind of mantric chant, there were loud noises, and we got up and merged our pigments, so that more or less the dualities became one, and it was a sensuous event. Yes, became gray. In cross, where there's I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of apples, and then roses around us, and we lay there for 3 hours, pretty much just breathing. But people would come in, and there were Gregorian chants going on, and this angel of death kind of hovered above, a sort of death and transcendence symbol. And this was like the living cross, this merging of dualities, that point of life, where life and death intersect and meet with the spirit. And these are life-sized figures. They're about 6 foot tall, and you stand in front of them and try to mirror them and give them. These are obviously details of larger pieces. Next one, Becky. So with this first part of the sacred mirrors, I was working them. And so then, once you put skin on the figure, you know, it gets very definite. It's no longer always drawing. So next slide. So there's just a few different races and sexes that just point one towards this difference, but also ask people to see, themselves reflected in others. So this piece people to start to consider the veracity or reality of these other energy systems. Then this is called the spiritual energy system, and it's we're totally out of our body, and though we were laying there in bed, and we were so. And in the Buddhist pantheon, this void clear light is like the same space that this infinite compassion of Avalokiteshvara comes out of. So this voidness and infinite compassion are part of the same space. And so that's why then it comes into this two sort of elements, sort of the Madonna here, and this is Kali in intercourse with corpse Shiva. She's kind of arising out of this ground of boundless eyes. So the principle or the reason for the sacred mirror is really just to see, yourself and all your surroundings as sacred. Yin yang, various traditional religions come out of the same common core. So, next piece. This kissing, and you know, if you want to make art about consciousness, there's no way, really. It's just like symbols. You got to play with symbols because there's, you know, consciousness is very difficult to describe. But here I've used gold fire in an infinity symbol to symbolize consciousness and the weaving together of these two people in the different dimensions. So, uh-oh, this one's called copulating. And it's got the same golden bands here, sort of looping through the figures. And there's a little sort of cherub on one side, a sort of a life and death kind of angel here. And here it's kind of hard to see, but there's a Sri Yantra, this symbol of the coming together of the opposites right there in the center. And there's a trajectory of vortices coming off from the bodies here, and maybe they're signaling. This piece is called Tantra, and sort of a Mobius sphere, and the union of these two people becomes like this sort of meniscus of skin, this just envelope of skin that's coming together from this vast space. So, pregnancy. I've been trying to visualize the way that the soul and body work together, and rather than saying that the male breaks through, you know, the egg and determines things, or that the egg, you know, allows in the sperm, you know. So it's perhaps there's all three are working together. There's some kind of soul force that is activating both of these aspects. So I've used a little lotus to symbolize this soul indwelling spirit in the heart. And then up here there's another spiritual component, pregnancy. So channeling all these intense energies of birth, and the kind of scream that echoes back to one's own birth and perhaps to one's own death. You know, when you give birth, it's that amazing parentheses of, you know, you're between your own birth and death, and you've just contributed in this amazing way. So she's also channeling the seed syllables of the Buddha. And you know, if anyone was ever a compassionate service, it's the birthing mother. So here's the Om, and then Ah, and then Hum. And there's a million hums come spreading out. Yeah. Nursing. So here you can see on the physical level the milk going in. And then all these other levels, other dimensions, the sort of electro-biomagnetic fields that are interacting, but also this spiritual bonding that takes place between parents and children. Yes. So this is our daughter, Zena Lotus, and she's holding this sphere, this tigle, and this is the Tibetan mantra Ah. And it's a symbol of primordial purity, which children seem to emanate. So, in this same kind of propagandistic, looking towards the future, here's the new family. I did this before we had our family, but this is a piece called Healing, and I was trying to visualize it came. This interaction of, you know, some spiritual element here, like the Jesus kind of shadow, and this common circuit that the healer and patient are channeling and tapping into the same. Next. This piece is called Dying. This is one of Terence McKenna's favorite paintings, he's told me. And because for him it indicates a sort of DMT experience. Here, the dying person is exuding this kind of ectoplasmic wisp that's going through this tunnel toward the light. And this tunnel, I would say, is like primordial awareness. And this being is like returning to their field, to that field. Yeah, next. Adam and Eve, since we said it was a psychedelic art talk, Adam and Eve I thought would be appropriate. Here, in their hands down here, they have different kinds of mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms. And down here is our favorite weed, all along the bottom. And so they're eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So, for the demonic serpent of biblical fame becomes the Kundalini that is enticing them into their own higher self-awareness. So, Gaia, the problems that we're in. Here's New York, our home, and on this side, and everything worth keeping on the other. So I had this vision the day that our daughter was born, and anyway, I think we all feel that. This piece is called Journey of the Wounded Healer, and this is an 18-foot long piece. I have some close-ups of. This first one, it's like an evolutionary descent, kind of a spiral of different biological evolution, and getting stuck in that. So, next. This is like the shamanic dismemberment phase, you know, where everything's getting chopped up, and opening up to like lots of different energies from all different levels, you know. There's this kind of funny alchemical snake is body, mind, spirit, and there's planetary forces, molecular forces. It's opening up to forces on new levels, integrating. And then this is the sort of reintegrated phase, the ascent, and the balancing of polarities here, and moving up this mountain towards self-awareness, and more Apollonian to that Dionysian kind of piece. What happens when he gets to the top of the mountain? Another 18-foot thing, it's called Holy Fire. So the caduceus becomes a Kundalini ascent. And kind of also there's a little divine grace that comes channeling in there and opens up the character. I had a vision of this on my ecstasy experience, one of my ecstasy experiences. And so, you know, for everybody who's done ecstasy, there's this jutting jaw up here. This is a giveaway. I know that. And you can see he's smiling here. Even though the face is ripped off, you know, he's still smiling. This is the physical body becoming reabsorbed in the transcendental sun, and the emergence of this divine mutant, kind of soul bird, as the true nature of the self. So that then the reassembled being comes down. There's a kind of a new alignment of heaven and earth, and he's radiating out this vibe to whoever wants to listen. Then, in honor of psychedelics, this vision occurred to me after 2 major hits of acid about peaking time. We're trying to... Yeah, there. Oh, back.
We'll do this by itself.
There. All right. Okay. Anyway, there was a ship for the gods. Our little highness here. This piece was called Theologue, and it's a 15-foot long painting. It's got this was sort of my peak of that trip. After all of that deities and demons drinking from the milky pool sort of collapsed, I was staring into a mindful, and there was this electric perspective grid just going, you know, totally as far as the eye could see into infinite space of one's own projected mind. It was, you know, it was that curious thing about you're projecting the space that you're surrounded by. You're creating your own reality. All of a sudden, then, this mountainscape just sort of emerged briefly and then dissolved back into the grid. And I called it the union of human and divine consciousness, weaving the fabric of space and time in which the self and its surroundings are embedded. A little close-up of that. It's coming towards the end. This piece is called Collective Vision. We're not getting sharpening. Oh, back,
It does
back.
that itself. Keep
We're
your hand
trying
in
the
it.
best we can here, folks.
Oh, that's beautiful.
There you go. So it's a, whoa, hey.
Doesn't want to focus. I think it's stoned.
I love
Yeah.
it. I like the moment.
Anyway.
I'm not doing that. It's doing that
We
itself.
like it. We like it.
There we go. It's going in and
It's doing that itself.
It's getting stoned. Hey!
It's trying to focus on all different parts of the painting.
yeah, it's very odd. Anyway, this piece was called Prostration.
Oh, yeah.
And so, let's see, it's hard to see what's going on here. There's a lot of little deity forms up here, and a lot of little sparkling lights, a few ferocious or horrific deities. But basically this person's saying, okay, you know, I'm yours, and these are, you know, it's channeling some form of light and life into this, the will centers along the back. You know, they talk about the different chakras, and there's will centers that are in the back. So this is, the divine will is reprogramming this character. And here's pop, you know, for those of you who've Alex done that. Yeah. After I worked for 2 years on, it's, anyway, it's this hermaphroditic being that's copulating with itself. Let's see the next slide. A little bit closer up, you can see this going on. It's got a fish's tail. It's got the animal's claws here. And so it's sort of the lower, middle, and upper realms, you know, like a shamanic animal. And let's see. It's got this dome here, the all-seeing, omniscient kind of presence. This is taking a view from the male side. And it's got a wrathful side. It's got a peaceful and a wrathful side. So here's the wrathful is cradling this infant. So, you know, everything that's born dies, but also maybe everything that dies is reborn. And so it's giving the teaching mudra, saying, you know, let's think about this coming generation, what kind of world we're leaving for them. I'm working on some idea of a chapel for the sacred mirrors. So this is just an early prototype. But anyway, thank you.